It really has been a whirlwind few weeks at Norwich City. Jack Wilshere ends the season as the interim head coach, and I think that on everybody's radar at the moment is wondering who will be the next permanent head coach. And let's try and dissect some of that today. I filmed the video last week taking a look at kind of the early betting market and a lot of the classic kind of domestic managers on that list: Gary O'Neill, Russell Martin, Steve Cooper, etc. There are, of course, other probably slightly bigger roles to fill within the English football pyramid at the moment, including, you know, the clubs coming down from the Premier League. You've got the likes of West Brom who are searching for a manager. So all of the lists look quite similar at the moment, and I think there's a reason for that. There's not a huge amount of kind of English managerial talent that's had experience within the kind of English football pyramid, and not just English, just experience that's had time to develop and deliver within the top few leagues in England, including those that are currently out of country as well. So you're never kind of picking from a huge list. There are, of course, names that we will have probably never heard of or have heard of, but certainly aren't tracking. You look at certainly Johannes Torp, but David Wagner, Alex Neil, going back that far, Daniel Farker, all of these are slightly left field names that certainly weren't on the betting markets and probably weren't on most people's radar. Jack Wilshere is kind of the subject of today's video, and I think a really interesting topic because it feels like things are starting to click in terms of the plan that he probably had for himself and potentially the plan that Ben Napper had for him. He came to the football club having managed Arsenal under-18s. He was there for a couple of seasons. He kind of earned his badges working at youth level, and said in last week's press conference that he moved from Arsenal because he thought he was ready for to make a difference, to make an impact on a senior team. Norwich were the choice, and that was largely because of his good friend and former colleague Ben Napper, who came here as sporting director. Now, Jack Wilshere obviously retired from playing early and threw himself into coaching. I think he has an incredibly kind of mapped out route of what he looks like. I think he's an incredibly driven individual and wants to progress his career forwards, like everybody does. Whether it's Jack Wilshere or anyone else, they want to be kicking forwards. I think Jack Wilshere more than most. So he joins Norwich in the backroom staff of Johannes Torp and Glenn Riddlesholm. And I think that at the time of bringing Johannes in, and I think this was publicly said by Ben Napper, first of all, there was a delight that we'd got him here because there was interest from other and potentially bigger football clubs. And there was an understanding that probably would be poached at some stage. There was an understanding that if this goes well at Norwich City and if they achieve their targets, that we now know that behind the scenes was top six, although that may not have been communicated very well with Johannes, that a bigger club would come in for Johannes, and then we'd kind of be back to square one. We are at that level in the food chain where if things go well for Norwich, whether that's manager or player, they're usually snapped up by a bigger team. So I think that was in the mind of Ben Napper. We've lost Johannes, but it wasn't for that reason. It was because he was sacked and it didn't go to plan, and whatever happened, and they thought that it wasn't working long term. So we are now in a situation where Jack Wilshere takes charge and will take charge for the final game of the season against Cardiff, and has already taken charge for the game against Middlesbrough at the Riverside last week. I think that there was a hope and a belief, and maybe this has been fast-tracked by some at the football club, that Jack Wilshere was potentially the man that when Johannes did get poached, and I'm talking hypothetically here because this was probably the plan put in place, that Jack Wilshere would come through and kind of take the reins after a good kind of education at Arsenal, a couple of seasons at Norwich City, working under Johannes, and then kind of thrown into that path. That's happened after, well, not even a full season. And we are in this situation where Johannes was sacked with 2 games left to go. And Jack Wilshere has said publicly that he wants the job. I think he's a very straight sort of shooter, isn't he, Jack Wilshere? And I think what you get what you see. You get exactly what you see with Jack. And he said, he was asked multiple times, do you want the job? Are you sticking your hat in the ring? And he's, yes, I want this job, and I think I'm ready. I think you look at that kind of similar age bracket of England, of English kind of players that have now transitioned into managers. You've obviously got Russ being one. I know he'll call himself a Scot. Wayne Rooney, Tom Cleverley, Frank Lampard. There are a lot to varying degrees of success that have gone down this route. And at some stage, I think you are relying on a club to take a chance. And I think that probably happens quicker than average, if we're being honest, because of the name that they carry. Jack Wilshere is a name. He's got a following. He's had a very successful playing career, albeit quite a short one. I think that will carry weight in terms of being given a chance, maybe quicker than people think. The strange thing about all of this is probably the timing of it all, and Connor Southwell raised it brilliantly on the latest Pinkham podcast, whereby, like, if you knew that Jack Wilshere was going to be the man, do you not just wait until the end of the season and, you know, give Johannes the end like we did with David Wagner, where you kind of knew the inevitability of it all, but let's just see it through and then find our replacement? It feels strange that they've given Jack 2 games almost as a bit of a test. Like, you're not going to learn anything in 2 games. Yes, the performance away to Middlesbrough was far better and there was a response. I think some of the players have to look at themselves at why the contrast was so huge. That's a concern that seemingly just completely down tools as soon as they could under Johannes and kind of kick through. We knew that the performance levels were there, and we saw that under Wilshere. Granted, there were some nice tactical tweaks with Jack Stacey playing higher up the pitch, but at the end of the day, you're playing a Middlesbrough side away from home that we've drawn to, and then we're playing an already relegated Cardiff, where you probably expect to dominate the ball. And look, let's hope for a performance, and let's hope for a really good day at Carrow Road on Saturday for the kind of season finale. But I don't think you're learning anything in that period of games. You are going to learn something over 10, 20, 30 games next season. And yes, I think most managers will find the response very quickly. You've got players in that dressing room playing for moves. You've got players playing for selection next season. You've got youngsters who are trying to come through and really, you know, solidify their places in the front of Jack Wilshere's mind. So of course you're going to see a response, but is that sustainable over a large period of time? The period of time needed in order to gain promotion for the Championship, and well, only time will tell with that. But if they're wanting to kind of quiz Wilshere on a 2-game basis, I think that seems completely and utterly pointless. So there's either a short list of names that they're working through, but I more and more I just think that this is probably Wilshere's job to lose. And the other strange thing about this is, you know, we haven't heard from Ben Napper yet, so there may be different points as to why Johannes was sacked. I think the obvious ones were the playing style probably wasn't working like we thought. Other than Kellen Fisher, which player was, you know, improved under his watchful eye? And he'd quite clearly lost the dressing room. I mean, I think part of that is obviously on him. He is the man to motivate the players. Part of it is, I think, a lack of professionalism within that dressing room, but that's probably a subject for another video. But we have ultimately got rid of Johannes because he was inexperienced in this division and didn't know how to kind of finesse their way through a Championship season. And we will, if we do hire Wilshere, we will be handing it over to someone younger, arguably more inexperienced, because he's not managed a single senior game in, well, he has now, but until Saturday hadn't managed a single senior game of football. And we're going, okay, like, we believe in this. I don't really know what Wilshere's style is. I'm not against the idea, but it feels like a slight quirk in this kind of project where we've abandoned it under Johannes and then we're trying to take it up again under Jack Wilshere. It feels like if it hasn't worked under Johannes, then what went wrong? Okay, so there was probably a lack of experience. There was an inability to, you know, carve a culture within the place. He might be really good at all of these things. We don't know, but it does feel strange to go, you're inexperienced, it's not working, and go, you're inexperienced, it will work. that is an interesting journey, and one I'm sure we will learn more about in coming weeks. But I do get the sense that this is probably going to be handed over to Jack Wilshere. And look, that feels exciting. But equally, you can see a world where that could well happen again. Like the kind of deficiencies and the frailties that we saw under Johannes may well rear its head again under Jack. Who knows? If he does get the job, best of luck. I'll be fully behind him. I love Jack Wilshere. I like him as a communicator. He's clearly very switched on. And what we saw in the very first game was certainly positive. But I look back to the early Johannes off Torp performances, and they were incredibly positive as well. You don't even have to look that far back to find a really positive moment. You know, I go back to kind of Watford away. That was in February, I think, 2 months ago, when Norwich were basically on the cusp of the top six. There was a great atmosphere. There was a great morale around the place, and quickly that kind of burnt and died. So we shall see. It's going to be fascinating. Look, they may well come up with a complete left field option and I'm left wrong, but I think the two main things for me are Jack was brought here for a reason, and he would have been sold a dream, and I think that dream was probably, you know, we either teach you how to be the head coach here or you will find opportunities elsewhere. And I don't think they're going to want to lose Jack Wilshere. I think they identified him. He would have been hot property. They've been able to bring him here through the connections that Ben Napper has. And I don't think they want to lose that season in. And I think the only way you don't lose that is if you give him a promotion ultimately. And that promotion would be into head coach. I think Cardiff's assignment on Saturday is different, and we need to see a performance, and he needs to impress the masses at Carrow Road. Yes, that performance at Middlesbrough was promising, but as we always say, like only kind of 800 people or however many it was felt that in person. You need to impress the masses at home, and that is a brilliant opportunity on Saturday against a team that will be absolutely on the floor, nothing to play for, and a really poor Championship side. So we shall see. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and who knows what happens from here. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.